a bunch of scholars had gotten together in Sweden and were sitting at this large table, and they were discussing the modalities of truth, and they were getting deep and heavy, and Christ manifested in the midst of that gathering. And they stood there, and he said, "Who do you say that I am?" And one said, "You are immanent goodness manifesting yourself in the midst of conflict and decision." And one by one, they made all these deep theological statements. And finally he said, "Say what?" You know, and so I think these profound. One of the things that Dr. Earl said that was profound to me in a setting where we were both together was, he said there needs to be an institutionalization of wisdom in the current culture, and I think that may be the answer to that, because I don't know that with all the information we offer people, because theology can be information if we don't have the wisdom to know how to apply it, and so we have not carved out a space for wisdom.
Oh wow, yeah, I think you're on the money, on point. And I did hear you I kind of flinched when you used the language of dumbing down, because we have such a challenge here of trying to get students to get on the intellectual elevator. Maybe it's not the elevator we want them on, but the escalator, to go up to the next floor and explore the space and rooms up there that they have chosen not to. Well, maybe it's not the escalator, maybe it's taking the stairs, ascension.
Where, let's just deal with the American culture. For a season, Oprah was America's pastor. And then Dr. Phil became America's pastor. And more people were listening to Oprah and now to Dr. Phil than they listen to preachers. The reason is, whether or not I would agree with all of Oprah's ideology or Dr. Phil's methodology. Having studied psychology, I can tell you that one of the favorite topics at Saybrook was Dr. Phil's how not to do counseling. I mean, they really picked on him. But anyway, and I think he's a great guy. But the fact is, there is a need in the culture, and Oprah intuitively, tacitly picked up on the need of the culture and began to engage the culture at a level of conversation and provided stories, narratives of people's journey, and invited them on a transformation to wholeness. What we tend to do is take the sacred desk and lecture. And in fact, our lecturing presupposes that people want to hear us. When in actual fact, if he left glory and impoverished himself to move into our neighborhood and live next door and live with us, to incarnate himself, so that if Christianity is anything, it has to become incarnational, then how do we learn how to be delivered from a dynamic of seeing that it's all, and listen, I love to preach, we all love to preach, you can't, I mean, we're called to preach. But how do we understand the kerygma as event and learn how to create opportunities and spaces for event to take place and interaction to take place, where incarnation can be a reality and Jesus gets fleshed out in the conversation? I think, you've got cameras here today, but my thing would be this seminary needs to seriously think about how can we, if we start in Metro Atlanta, not just once in a while, but what if we had a Sunday afternoon forum that was live, that we aired on television, where the most brilliant minds from 3 generations that are all part of ITC sat and talked about relevant issues based on the biblical narrative and why we are not ashamed of the solutions we offer based on the truth we propose. And I will offer you this, okay? Jan and Paul have had me raise millions of dollars for them. If you want to create contagion and an event to raise money to get what you need from media, I'll come and preach and raise you some money. Because I think that if we have a compelling vision of what can be, and it speaks to the hunger in people, I am as sure as I can be that there are far more competent voices in the kingdom that can address human need than those from a secular perspective who are touching surface issues that make it sound really good and can edit and fix and frame it for TV ratings. I think people are looking for authenticity, they're looking for transparency, they're looking for vulnerability, and I think we need to be that, because that's, to me, what it means to, I mean, if he was willing to be stripped naked and endure and the shame and despise the shame and let everybody see him at his worst moment, and yet through that all men were drawn to him. How do we do that? Even if it means we suffer, are we willing to suffer with him outside the camp and discover that Exodus events still might happen if we dared to believe God can make a way out of no way?
Well, thank you for the offer, the challenge, and thank you for the offer. That is where we are here at this institution. We're trying to rebuild it and rebuild it to fit the mission statement, or even to revise the mission statement in some places, and let the times in which we live challenge us as to what we do and how we do it. One of the blessings is, we often say to ourselves, to each other, that we have been blessed to be here, and without so many of the resources that mainstream places have, and that allow them to do the kind of things they do. But students come anyway. And I think they come because they believe that there is something rich and invaluable that we bring to the people at the margins, bring to the expressions and interpretations of the faith narratives and faith journeys. I had said to our musician this morning, and I hope she will do it as we come to a close, to do a Go Tell It on the Mountain, that old Negro spiritual, go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere, that Jesus Christ is born. What a message, what a challenge that we have. I think this is just, it's so rich, because we have students here from every different fabric of the black church religious experience. And some of them are from the Lutheran or the majority denominations. But even in those denominations, we've been marginal. Yeah, we've been a marginal people. And when you hear the goodness that comes out in the aesthetic of song, of prayer, etc., from people of the margins, we often, it demands attention. Would you say a little more about something that Dr. Bennett said in terms of the Pentecostal? I think it had to do with how do you once the Dr. Bennett, would you raise that? That was an issue that you raised. It was very complex. But would you say some more about this whole issue of once the Pentecostals have become normative, so to speak? I think that's what I heard from you. Then how do you what is the danger of that normalcy, of that new status, in terms of still being the people of God that are maintaining the richness of that identity that you had at the margins? That's a very, to me, that's a very complicated question, because, you know, there is a sense in which at the margins you are suffering a deficit, and at the same time you are enjoying a surplus. It seems that the surplus is that there's a certain level of rich power of spiritual sensibility that people at the margins have. Often the deficit is, as we struggle here at this school, we lack the resources, the economic resources, to get our message to the center.
Yeah, and I think on a number of levels, the Pentecostal movement within Christendom in the West has been demonized, to the point where, you know, recently we've got a guy on the West Coast that calls it strange fire. My problem on a number of levels with him is that I want to say, sir, are you a racist? Because the Pentecostal movement happened in the black community in the ghetto of Los Angeles, and it was God doing something that hasn't been done in the church since its inception. There is nothing in church history that can compare with what happened in the Azusa outpouring. It is unprecedented. And in the last 100 years, the Pentecostal movement has done more for the Great Commission than the entire church has done in all 2,000 years of its history. So if we have set the move of God back, there must be some other move of God that Jesus is talking about, because I don't think we fully appreciate the rich heritage of Pentecost. Harvey Cox made the statement in The Future of Faith that it's the Pentecostals that are going to change the world.
He did.
Yes. And so whether we like it or not, the fastest growing Christian movement on the planet are the Pentecostals, because they have a passion for the presence of God. They are presence driven. They are not ashamed of the experiential, phenomenological side of Christianity. They're not afraid to be mystics, though that too is demonized. And they are brilliant, and they can articulate the message, but they are not given the platform, because mainline denominationalism is reactionary instead of interactionary, and so we are forced to the margins, and there is a politics of truth that goes with it that I just wonder if we need to, instead of being disparaged about being marginalized, take it as our prophetic dynamic that it is from the margin that the Reformation is going to come, and then dare to believe that there is no lack in God and that provision will come in ways we haven't considered yet. And that I don't think the pie has only so many pieces. If I believe that God is absolutely omnipotent, then I don't have to worry about a piece of the pie somebody else getting. I think there's enough pie for everybody, and it keeps multiplying. So I think that we need to recover the dignity of Pentecost without apologizing for the fullness of the expression of the Spirit. Does that help?
It does. Professor Earl, how much time? I'm in love with this conversation. Okay. All right, it's on. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we give God some glory for this conversation, as well as to our respondents?